Good day, good evening, and hello everyone. For those of you joining us from here and around the world, and in this edition of the Cyber Future Foundation's CFFLive session, we have Troels Oerting, and we'll have a long bio to go through, which might fill the entire session, but we'll take a sneak peek at that. First, hopefully everybody is doing well and helping both with the situation personally as well as from business and socially. I have had a chance to speak with many of you in person and bringing those thoughts to this discussion, trying to make sure that we are able to make an impact as well as stay connected together and learn from each other. It's almost 3 months now until when we had this isolation and lockdown started. Things have moved from a response to more of a recovery phase. Hopefully, we'll get to a revival phase very soon, and that's where we have leaders like Troels coming and joining us, sharing their experiences and the work that they have been doing individually. As for our introduction to Troels, I think many of you already know Troels personally or through your professional connections. He's been a global leader and cybersecurity expert for excellence for over 3 decades and many years of contribution in security in general. He was also the first founding head of the Cybersecurity Center for Cybersecurity at the World Economic Forum. I think that was a tremendous global organization that he started, and in very short time has become a catalyst for global thinking. He now serves as the chair of the Global Center for Cybersecurity, which he established within the World Economic Forum in 2018 for mitigating global challenges to security, privacy, and integrity imposed by the digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution, engaging a global range of global stakeholders to create a dialogue and discussion. And very action-oriented is what definitely an inspiration or motivation for a lot of us in the field. Before joining World Economic Forum, Troels was the global Chief Information Security Officer as well as Chief Security Officer for Berkeley's. I think that's a tremendous amount of practical expertise and experience that we can lean on and learn from. And previous to that, he was the first director for European Cyber Crime Center, the EC3, an European Union-wide center located within Europol to assist law enforcement agencies in protecting 500 million citizens in the 28 EU member states from cybercrime and loss of privacy. But that work, as you can very well imagine, spills over into the global impact that he has had so far. So Troels, welcome to this program. Great to chat with you again over this session. As you know, we got together a couple of days back just for the weekend to speak about the range of topics that we can speak of, right? And I don't think I'm doing justice by having a 40-minute conversation with you. Now we can have a full day session on this, but I would love to know from you and learn from you and the greater community as they have reached out to learn about the road to recovery and revival, right? And I think we are at a point where we are starting to realize there are a lot of lessons learned in terms of how we responded. Some of your thoughts around that, and then also I think you have a great passion about the real need for cybersecurity, both in terms of protecting the humanity and the socioeconomic structures we have, and of course some of that. And then having seen both the positive and negative sides, we've been part of law enforcement groups for a long time, probably the entire career. How does the future look like as we return to workplaces, disengage from the work from home environment, go back to the workplace? And what would your advice for the leadership community would be? So with that, Troels, welcome to the program again. Let's hear from you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Val, and thank you for inviting me once again. And I'm happy to be here because it's a topic that that is very dear for me, is security in general terms, but of course, especially cybersecurity. And you and I, we also agreed that we have probably spoken enough about work from home, security, So we were trying now to put the longer lights on our car and look a bit further away to where will this end and what kind of impact will it have. And you allowed me then to come with my, let's say, prediction about this. First of all, I think that it's fair to say that we have all faced a very rapid change in cyber environment in the last, let's say, 5 years. And I think that we have all seen that the speed has increased dramatically and taken an exponential route, so to say. But I think also it's fair to say that the pandemic actually put this development on steroids. You know, in less than a week, we had to move globally 1 billion people working from home, from offices and into home, because we saw this move away from and this lockdown, which enforced us to do something. And that, of course, has speeded up a lot of the transformation, the digital transformation that still was very fast, but you know, it took a tremendous speed. I think that it's fair to say also that what we have been through in the last 3 months is, first, we tried as security officials to stabilize the situation. So the first headline was stabilization. How do you actually work as a CISO when suddenly, when you are used to that 80% of your staff is around you inside an organization where they meet in with a tie on, with their access badge, with rules and all of that, and then suddenly they work in their pajamas from home. You know, so to say, an unprepared staff working on unprepared technical tools with unprepared processes and policies, because we didn't have that in the majority of the companies. So the first was to stabilize. After the stabilize, I think the next headline was normalize. So now I think we've been through the stabilization. I think it went actually through with my colleagues around the globe. I've been quite impressed to see how fast we could adapt to it without, you know, major impact, without major disruption. And now I think we are in the period of still normalizing the situation, because we also don't know what will the new normal look like. And then when we know that, I think we are moving to the next headline, which is optimize. So stabilize, normalize, and then we optimize. We have to optimize in the new situation because this is expected from us and from our businesses to do so. In the majority of the Danish big companies, there has already been a number of polls. How do you want to see your workday after we have lifted the lockdown? And you will see that the majority of the staff, actually over 50%, wants to have a flexible work now. So they want to work from home, 2 to 4 days, which is a dramatic shift for the Danes. We would only allow normally, 5-10% to work from home. The rest would walk in. But I think that people have adapted to it. They get rid of the commute. They get rid of all that, and it blends into a different way of working and balance. From the owners of the workplaces, I think they have the same drivers. If they can get rid of lots of huge office buildings and instead move people to pay, to use their own home as an office, this is also something that they would. So I think that I think that we can all agree that the next normal, when we open up the world again, will not be that we just return back to the world as we knew it. I think that you will see more of this. And that is, of course, what we are going to talk about now, is how can we make that work, and how can we continue to develop as business and as individuals and as nations in this new reality, where the most of what we are doing is doing online. First of all, I think that I think that what I've learned from the pandemic, and if we look at the pandemic as an infection of a virus, then we as cybersecurity professionals, we know also about viruses and infection, and we have had global infections from time to time, and we still saw it. But WannaCry was a very good example, right? That it affected, suddenly millions of users and computers in various countries. And are there any similarities that we can also maybe for the first time, use some of the experiences that we have to help in the pandemic. If you look at the way we have handled the pandemic, I don't think it has been impressive. You know, you've seen many nation leaders, some had a lockdown, some waited, some tried to minimize it. And that was basically because nobody knew what to do and nobody could really manage it. We didn't have resilience plan for that. I think also the criminals didn't have resilience plans for that. So we haven't seen any big uptick in the crime. But I look at the situation as we have it now, that we are in a pre-vaccine pandemic. So we haven't found the vaccine. This is the same as being in a situation where you have a 0-day exploit, where we haven't patched yet. So we haven't got any remediation, and this is what the criminals will use until we get this vaccine to patch. So what do we do also, not just to patching? I think that the next way of similarities is that we have already in our networks and computers made segregation, you know, so we segregate those of our network that are more vulnerable than other networks. We do the same in the pandemic. You take people who are more vulnerable, maybe the elderly and other ones, and you try to protect them a bit better than the youngsters and whatever, because they're more resilient. And I think, again, that we can learn from here. And what is it that we do in the future? I guess that you will have detection tools in airports. You will have temperature scanners. You will have maybe other kinds of scanners. This is the same as we do with endpoint security, right? We scan traffic and then we allow the good traffic to pass through and we block the bad traffic. So I think there might be a way of cooperating between the knowledge for the first time that we have with the healthcare organization. And I think that we should consider this in the cooperation that we have in the future. But having said that, I also think that there will be other areas that will change in the future. Imagine loyalty. I think you can build loyalty to an organization, to a workplace, by having team session, team building, town halls, you know, all of this that creates some kind of loyalty that also have the impact that you do not cheat on your organization. But how do you build loyalty in an online environment where I might have to hire people virtually? I might not meet them. I hire them, I introduce them virtually. I say, this is your team, your virtual team, and you work from home. How do you cope with that in this new reality? And as you probably know, we have in the World Economic Forum established what is called a cybersecurity pandemic task force, where we are looking at downsides and what seems to be the biggest problem for the organization and the big companies. And the biggest problems that everybody has now is the insider threat. The ability to monitor what I'm doing, what I have access to. And I think there is a difference in the way that when I come into my office, I am ready, I've been in the shower, I've commuted, I go through an access control, I sit down, I log on, I have colleagues, you know, and all of that. And there is a certain environment that you're also feeling that you might not be monitored, but you are still a part of an organization. But now you work in your pajamas, you know, directly from your bed. You walk in here in front of your screen and you start working. You don't speak to people in the same way you might have online meetings, but you have access to anything that you have. And you can take photos, you can take videos, you can do whatever you want of the most sensitive documents that you have. And how do you make sure that this is not, you know, in effect, and we don't have any technical tools to prevent this. We only have that we trust you that you won't do that, right? And how will that impact the way that we work in the future? Then I think that by speeding up the way that we are online always, that will be a huge change. So in the old days before the pandemic, we always said that there were 4 drivers for cyber development. The first one was that we would move to mobile devices and we will upgrade to 5G. That was a huge driver because that will increase the internet population with the double of what it is right now. So big continents like Africa would probably skip the computer and go directly to use mobile devices. So that was the first one. The second one was IoT, that everything will be connected, everything will be sensing, everything will be storing, and everything will also be stored. That was also a big driver, that everything, so suddenly you had devices all over, you would have sensors that would speak to my phone, that I'm here location-wise, I should have been in another area, my agenda says, so that there will be lots of communication here. So you have more users, more devices, more traffic, and then you have cloud services that also helped us to store all of that. So suddenly you could create all kinds of storage on any movement. That's also what we see now in contact apps and whatever. So you can store all of this, of course, for good reasons, to use it for KYC. Maybe you want to use the data for curing cancer, dementia, whatever. And then the fourth driver was artificial intelligence, because you needed that to get something out of it. Now you can add a fifth dimension, which we hadn't before. It is that everything we do from now on, when we work, when we meet, when we educate, when we sail, when we do marketing, when we exchange, will be online also. And because it's online, it's also stored, it might be recorded, it might be everything. That creates an enormous amount of data, first of all, that is suddenly available, not to nation states, but to big companies. Will they sell it? Will they use it? Could we use face recognition right now here, what we are doing? So we could, all of this is of course something that creates some kind of impact, not on security per se, but on privacy, on integrity. So that is something that we need to discuss in the future, is what do we do with all of these data? And you know, normally we have, as an individual citizen in any country, we have what is called a social contract. So if we live in a free country, we have freedom of speech, freedom of your apartment, freedom of everything, but it's always based on the assumption that you follow the law. If you do not follow the law, you have also the contract with your society that they can actually maybe tap your phone, maybe they can make surveillance, maybe they can arrest you, they can search you and whatever, and they can eventually put you into prison if you do not apply to the rules. That is the social contract we have in the physical world. What now in this new digital world, where it seems that everything I do, you do, we do together is in one way or another stored somewhere. With private companies, it might be exchanged, it might be used with AI, it might be profiled, it might be used with face recognition, biometrics, voice recognition, what do I know? What kind of social contract do we now have in this future world, and how would that impact the way we live, and will it impact privacy? Is privacy dead, or do we have rules for privacy? And is that still a possible, you know, a thing to discuss about? So I think that is another area. The last thing I want to touch upon is how do you teach the next generation that might not meet their friends and their companions in the physical world, but more online. So you beam in like here and you do things. And if I look at my grandchildren, they are always on media, social media, Instagram, whatever. They're always on this. How do you create some kind of rules and norms? How do you educate them what is right and wrong? What does it mean that if you do mobbing online, you know, if you see something in the physical world, we know how people react to what is called bystander reaction. So if I, for instance, see that somebody is attacking a girl in the street, I might, based on who I am, I might either go in and do something about it, or at least I will call the police. There will be a minority that will not do anything, of course, always. But that is what we know about how we react in situations like that. But what happens if you see the same online, that somebody is being severely beaten up online, or you know, or their data is exchanged? What is the bystander effect online, and how do we manage that? And I think that is some of the areas that we need to look at in the next wave of changes that we face together. That we will make sure that we have a safe and secure internet, first of all. That's something that is very complex in this new world. Secondly, that we enforce privacy and we do not react like we do now only on fear. So if you, for instance, want to do something as a good politician, you create an atmosphere of fear. You can die. Unless you download my contact app here and we can follow you, then you will die. But is that right to do that? Or should we have a voice of reason that says that it might not be about life and death? Why is it that we want these data stored? For what use? And will there be a sunset clause? Will they expire at some point? Or will we just continue to collect more and more data about us? And in this way, we will create a new Orwell 84 society or Hunger Games where everything is done in this environment, which I don't think personally is desirable in any way. But how can we make this discussion without being afraid of dying from COVID-19? And if I haven't got this app, I will die. And then you might download it and you might share everything. But I think there might be conditions. So I think that it's about security, first of all, then privacy, and then integrity. And what I talk about when I talk about integrity is the ability to change. That I'm speaking now, and this, I can assure you, this is Troels. But you also know that with voice and face swap, you can change this very easily. So I could say things that I would never say, and you might even believe it was me, right? And what kind of damage will this do? So I'm not trying to make this difficult. I just think that we should stop up from time to time, and we should have an open discussion about both security, privacy, and integrity based on facts, not on fear. Right. Based on that we are protecting hope. We are not, selling fear. We are protecting hope. And based on that, I think that we have all the chances in the world to use the digital transformation to what it's best at, to create a positive turnaround of our society, an easier life for me and you, where we can make better education, better democracy. We can cure a lot of diseases by doing the right thing for the right reasons. But there will also be a downside. And if we just run into that without considering it, then I think that we might not be as well off as we thought. So that should be my introduction to the discussion here. And then, of course, I'm at your disposal if you have any questions. Or
of course, Troels. I mean, thank you for the extensive range of impacts and situations that you outlined. I believe, from the vantage points that we respectively sit, we are seeing the whole breadth from both personal impact to a societal impact to an organizational impact coming up, and it is probably upon us and the communities that we all are connected to see how we can be a part of that change, right? One thing that amongst all this, of course, these are all great important points. I think if we break this up into, say, the professional toolkit or professional guide that we would want to bring to the industry versus the personal due diligence that you have to do to make sure that you bring back. For example, you mentioned about we are in a stage where we have to move from we have stabilized and then we'll move to optimize, right, at some stage very quickly. And then this is definitely the 0-day stage, right, where there's a vulnerability and you have to get beyond it. I see here that the two aspects that you mentioned about loyalty and talent, right, which basically is a personal connection to your organization, versus the insider threat that are also being generated as part of the layoffs, right? There is a huge downturn going in the organizations. So do you have any general thoughts around how the organizations can cope with this? This is a spontaneous question that came to my mind. I think, as I'm seeing, like tens of thousands of people are getting laid off, and they probably are doing this within the transition that they have not really returned to work, right? And that could be a huge, so how do you connect the emotional talent issues that we have with the insider threat situation?
I think it is a great question, and unfortunately, I'm not able to answer it because I simply think that it is something. It is uncharted territory, right? So we are entering something where we are trying to run big businesses or small businesses with people and colleagues and human beings that we haven't seen, we haven't touched, we haven't had this, I can always, if I'm together with you, I can see on you, even if you don't say anything, if you dislike something I say, or if you like, we have this engagement in our body language, which we cannot in the same way have here. And you will also see many of the calls, people simply just, stop the videos and they are still on the call, but they do all kinds of other things, and they might do things like this to the people who are speaking. We cannot see that. So how do you create loyalty, team spirit, responsibility for the workplace in this new? I simply don't know. But I think that is something that we need to stop and consider. Right. So it's not just about our ability to hire the right people. It's actually to keep them on board, engaged, and positively developing. Otherwise, they will also just be butterflies that will go from job to job to job and never really find any loyalty, and basically don't giving a shit because they can move to the next one. That's not what we want. We want to have a long-lasting relationship with our core employees, because they are, for instance, Google have for many, many years, I've been on the Google campus many, many times, and the reason that they have 71 free restaurants on their campuses, and they have a free shuttle 24/7 to downtown San Francisco. That's not because they are generous. That's because they want these young people to come into campus, and instead of making their food at home, they come to campus to eat, because they believe that when people meet physically, there is collusion, something happens, and you need that if you want to innovate. So you need to have this duality, and I think that we will probably enforce a way of having to meet physically for introduction, for midterm courses and whatever. It doesn't need to be long, but I think you still need the physical way of doing. You cannot just do everything remotely. I'm not for some jobs, yes, but not for core jobs. So I think that's something that is beyond you and me, Val, but you just need to take that out and consider it. How will we deal with that? How do you create?
And this is completely open up the floodgates up to, some of these practices will stay on with us, and how can we have that virtual physical interaction to make it more meaningful and engaging. So I completely agree with you. And next question that we have here is something that's on my mind as well. From Catherine from Canada, she posed a question that, do you think the post-pandemic we will find ways as both industry leaders and countries to work more collaboratively to address the issues, cyber risks that the new norm might create? I mean, I think might is just conjecture, but now it has created new norms. So how do we work as organizations collaboratively?
I think right now, my feeling is, and that is what I feel every day in the World Economic Forum, that we have never had so much, let's say, a geopolitical tension and distrust in the world as we have now.
Yes.
Since the Cold War, where we had the East and the West and the blue and the reds and whatever, then we had a 25 years with good corporations. Now, again, it seems that the Americans, the Chinese, the Russians, the Europeans, and whatever, they are not trusting each other, not believing in each other. And that's also why I claim that it's risk-free to be a cyber criminal, because nobody investigates them, because you can simply not make law enforcement investigate, globally. You might do it in the West, but it doesn't matter if some of the criminals are in the East, then you need to work with the East and vice versa.
That's true.
So I think that is a huge, huge challenge for us. And I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. On the contrary, I see even more polarized world with the US and China. Then you will have Russia, Europe in the middle somewhere. You will have the new continents also struggling, but there will not be this norms. You don't go to the UN. You don't have any institutions really.
Right.
So the lady is right from Canada that there is a need for it, because suddenly you will also maybe engage workers from various countries.
Mm-hmm.
So you will have maybe your red team in Canada, you will have your headquarters in Germany, you will have call centers in India and whatever. And how do you employ that, and how do you cooperate in the best possible way? We are trying in the forum to bring governments together with businesses and with what we call civil society on neutral grounds. So we will have Russians and Chinese and Americans in the same room and say, How can we deal with that? I think the only way out of that is businesses can drive that. I don't think nation states can do that. They are too much fed up with politics and we don't like them and we don't trust them. But business leaders tend to be more pragmatic because they want to do business and want to grow their business, and they have to do this in working with everybody. So I hope, I'm not really positive in my mindset in this area. I think that we have a bumpy road ahead of us still geopolitically, and I think we will see more distrust in the coming months before it gets better. But I will also think that the humanity will survive the internet. Of course we will, and we will find a way out. But I think that we are up for a bumpy road, and I think we need to create a platform of the willing, a coalition of the willing. And that might be with countries that are not traditionally working together, but they want to work together, or businesses across this, to get the best out of it.
Right, and I think that really goes back to the next question that one of our friends from Texas, Dave Willox, has asked about. How can alliances, global alliances, take this and adopt to the changes supported across the borders, both across cultural differences? I think in terms of businesses also, how I think that, as you mentioned, the people and the business part are the ones that are crucial now to rebuilding everything, right? Because of course, however the governments can posture, you and I can get together and agree on a certain terms and norms that we can take forward. Any guidance on around how organizations like WEF and CFF and others in the network can come together? I mean, do we need to build another alliance, or we reconnect on an agenda and make a mission and action oriented goal? What's your thought on that?
I think that organizations like CFF, the World Economic Forum, are known as what I call independent, neutral organizations. Mm-hmm. I'm friends in my cyber sense with everybody that wants to make the internet more safe tomorrow than today. And I don't care if they're Russian, Chinese, and whatever. I'm of course not naive, so I also know what nation states does in the dark. Of course I know that. But I'm trying to look at the normal crime that is done against us. And I think that we have a huge possibility to do alliances based on the already existing one. I don't think you can do it in the UN because this is only government or the EU. I don't think you can do it in trade organization where it's just the organization or corporate. I think that we need to combine governments with big businesses, with the civil society and academia, amongst those who want to make a difference. Let them make an alliance. So we, for instance, make an alliance on safer aviation in the World Economic Forum. This is with Airbus and Boeing and Hong Kong Airport and KLM, but also Aeroflot and other ones who wants to do that. And if they really want to make an airplane safer, then they will come together. And I think we can do this with energy sector, with healthcare, with other areas, because it doesn't matter if the victim is a Russian citizen or Chinese citizen or Danish or American. We want to secure people from not being attacked by criminals. Then, of course, I know nation states will spy on each other. They have always done that. They did that before the internet. They will do that after the internet. But I don't focus on this. I focus, first of all, of the 80% of unwanted criminal activity that is going on with ransomware, DDoS attack. They steal everything. That's what I'm concerned about. Secondly, I'm concerned about all the digital, let's say, traces we leave and who have access to those and how are they used. I think that's also something we need to discuss in these alliances.
Sure, no, absolutely. I think that the time is now more than ever. A thought connected to the initial discussion we had around the loyalty and talent and insider threat. One of our friends, our audience from here, Kim Nash, was asking about new tools we need to detect new threats from insiders. And I have just spill in there that there is you just mentioned about the whole data ownership part, right? The corporate data ownership versus those who have access to the data may treat it differently. What are your thoughts? And we've got a few minutes here. What are your thoughts around the exposure to that data that we have and the threats probably from insider as an insider person and versus the organization that we would have?
So I think again we have a fine balance here, right? So you have me as an employee. Mm-hmm. I have access to a lot of things, and there is hopefully some trust between me and the employer. But trust is good, but control is sometimes better, right? That's why we sometimes control what am I doing, what am I downloading, what am I sending, and all of that. And I think you can do that on a normal workplace. But now suddenly I am here at home and I can do everything with my phone, right? So I can take pictures, of the most secret documents, of documents that gives the recipe to Coca-Cola or to a Rolls-Royce engine or to whatever. And how can a company make sure that I'm not then sending that or selling that or doing that? And that's also, again, based on my level of trust to my company. And I think that we have a new dimension here. Again, I'm not able to give you a answer and say, I have the solution here. I know that all companies are looking for that solution without over monitoring their staff. That's first of all. And secondly, again, I think that maybe we should also consider, is it always needed to store so much data? Because criminals now, in the old days, they used ransomware to encrypt our data. In the future, they will pollute our data lakes, and then they will send a ransom letter and say, you cannot trust any of your algorithms because we have polluted the data that they are trying to measure. And again, I think we need purpose limitation of data. And that comes back to how much data should be stored about me, for how long time, and for what purpose. And do I own anything of these data? Should I be asked? And I also think we need to educate people that there are no free lunches. If you get anything for free, you are the product. So if you get a free email or free account or whatever, then you sign something that they can use everything you do on that. And I think that is also part of the education that most of our good friends in the world doesn't really care about right now, but they have to.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and it will probably become more and more evident as we move forward. And Troels, I know we are running on time on the clock here, but if you have a few more minutes, we can take a couple of more questions.
Yeah, that's happy for me. Yeah.
So now our friend from London, Dr. Jackie Taylor, mentioned about the division between the digital and non-digital companies. Do you see any the flexibility and the agility that the technology companies have versus the non-digital, like the hardware companies, which need flesh and blood and human person to manage their return to work versus the normal return to work for the tech companies? Any thoughts around that?
I think the new definition of companies is that all companies are tech companies, right, in one way or another. Mm-hmm. So in the old days, you ran a bank. Now you just run a technology company with money that as a commodity, right? If you produce windows or doors or whatever, you of course have a physical way of doing that, but you also use algorithms to design, to produce, to do it optimized. You do your marketing, you do your customization, your sale online and whatever. So there is no really, there is those who are real tech companies and those who are tech-enabled companies, so to say. And I think that both will be used in the future. You will still produce cars, you will still produce bicycle chairs and whatever. You will still need that in the physical world, but the way that they are shipped around the world will be done very much with help of algorithms and other things. And they are, again, vulnerable and whatever. So I think that no company can say to themselves that it doesn't really apply to me. I don't care about that because we don't really use the internet for anything else than maybe online sale. That's not true. All companies are dependent on internet, and that's why you will see an uptick in DDoS attacks. DDoS attacks will have a revival, I'm sure of that. So in the future, when you and I have this online meeting, somebody will just for fun make it go away by having a distributed denial of service attacks towards that, and we cannot speak, right? And then we will blackmail each other. So you will see availability of internet, not just stealing from it, but just the availability is a new commodity, and you will see an uptick in that. So I think that what we need to do is to create the next generation CISOs who can be part of the management team and not just because it's not about tech, it's not about people, it's not about processes, it's business, right? And cyber is just another operational risk that we need to mitigate. And the gentlemen or ladies who will do that need to be at the front line and in the inner circle of a company. And that doesn't matter if it's a small company or a big company. It's such a huge dimension these days that you need to have the right experts.
No, absolutely. I think, if we were not a digital company, we don't exist today. And in terms of having just the organization sustain themselves, they have become more digital than ever, especially now when they have to automate their workforce. They've also automate their processes and see where they can make the best of the human power that's available to them. So, with that, Troels, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting your thoughts around all this. I have so many other topics that we'll probably eventually address some other day, hopefully in a panel situation where we can have some a bit of more dialogue. Again, thank you so much. We will get to deep dive into some of these.
Thanks, Dr.
Just a quick announcement for those who are joining, to bring them back next Tuesday. We will have David Cass, who's been a very long-term friend of Cybersecurity Foundation. He's the VP of Risk at the New York Fed. He'll be available and come back to talk about what you see from the regulatory world, and I have we can take some of these discussions forward. So thank you so much. Take care. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.